Hello, St. Anne Parish, and welcome to this week's Quick Things video. Very quick things and then a conversation. So our Share Sunday collection is underway. Items that are needed are in the bulletin. So please be attentive to that. There's a link also with this email that will identify those items that we're collecting this Sunday, these first 2 Sundays of February, for the women's community here in Wausau. So if you can be generous, as much as one or several of those items, if you're able to contribute one or several, that's great. So the more of us who can participate is just as important as how much individuals contribute. Our Ash Wednesday liturgy sign up is underway. There's a link with this email as well for that. There will be more information about Ash Wednesday and all of our Lenten opportunities coming in an email that parishioners will be receiving soon in a newsletter rather that people will be receiving in the mail, and we'll have more in the emails coming up as well. Lenten information also at stanneswausau.org. We'll have a link with this email to that as well. A reminder in terms of the vaccines, I don't need to be reminding us the importance of getting the vaccine, but with this email is a link to the Centers for Disease Control website with some frequently asked questions about the vaccine, which I have found helpful, and I hope that you might as well, so that we have clear, concise information, that we're all getting our information from a reliable source and not, what our neighbor or coworker told us. That might not be true, but I think we can trust what we find at the CDC website. And then finally, the last announcement, giving statements for 2020 are available. You can stop in at the church and pick those up in the gathering space, or, and this would seem very reasonable, we can mail them to you. So just let us know, respond to this email, or call the parish office. It'd just be easy to respond to this email, and we can let us know, and we'll mail you the giving statement. So with that, I want to welcome our guest today. Tracy Rieger is the director of the Catholic Charities Warming Center here in Wausau. And so welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Is director the correct term, or are you executive director?
Oh, no. Just the director. So okay. My formal title is Director of Community Homeless Facilities for the Diocese of La Crosse. So okay. I oversee multiple different programs within the diocese, one of them being here locally in Wausau.
So are you in Wausau as we're speaking to you right now?
I am.
You absolutely are. And tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into this role.
Sure. So I'm not originally from the Wausau area. I'm from originally the Waukesha area, a little south of here. And I moved here probably about 5 years ago. And I have a nursing background. So I went to school to be a nurse. I have my bachelor's degree in nursing from a school in Milwaukee.
Which school? So you have to throw in the plug.
I went to a private school, Carroll College in Waukesha, okay. Which was associated with Columbia College of Nursing in Milwaukee. So, okay. And I did the nursing thing for many years. And 5 years ago, when I moved to Wausau, due to my husband's employment at the time, I found myself wanting to give back to my community immediately when I got here. And I looked into volunteer opportunities, and Catholic Charities, the Warming Center, was one of those volunteer opportunities. So the first year I was here, I spent a couple nights just volunteering in the shelter, and found that through my nursing background and one of my clinicals that I did in Milwaukee with homeless shelters, I found kind of a niche here. It wasn't until about a year and a half later where there was an opening for a coordinator position here at the shelter, and I applied for that and got that job in August of 2017.
Okay.
So that's kind of where my passion lies, and where I find myself to be the greatest use in our community.
Well, we're listening to how God is calling us in our circumstance. Sure. So you had a year or so to get your feet on the ground, or a couple of years to get established before the COVID crisis hit, huh?
Yes.
We'll get to that in a minute. So thank you. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your story. Tell us about the Warming Center. So are we like in year 10, or how long has that been in existence?
Sure. So we have been in existence since 2010. We've moved our location a few times since we opened. Originally, we started in the basement of St. Paul's Church, And we have found ourselves most recently at the First United Methodist Church due to COVID, and we will touch on that a little bit later. But my office is based at 540 South 3rd Avenue, which is where Shelter was operating prior to COVID.
Right.
So that's where I currently reside, and Shelter again is offsite somewhere else right now.
Okay. And basically, what happened when? And tell us what your service is before we get into too many others.
Sure. Well, it's interesting to note that Catholic Charities provides multiple different programs. Serving the homeless population is just one of many programs that we have here in this building. So we offer financial assistance for rent, energy assistance. We have an adoption program. We have some additional programming for people with families with children called Project Step Up. And then, the homeless services, we provide our shelter, and then we have a program called Beyond Shelter. And all of those programs run right out of this office here in Wausau. So we are an emergency shelter. We operate only during the coldest months of the year. So we operate from November 1st through April 30th. Again, we're a night-by-night shelter, so it's not a program-based shelter. So somebody who presents tonight to shelter does not need to reside with us for a certain amount of days. They can come tonight and not come back for a week, and that's okay. We generally meet people where they're at. So the person that you meet today may not be the same person you meet tomorrow, just based on what they're dealing with, their AODA issues, mental health issues, whatever circumstance. So we operate 7 p.m. at night through the following morning at 8 a.m.
Okay. And so there's a meal that's served when people arrive in the evening. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. Every night of the week during our operational hours or times, we have a volunteer bring in a meal, and a lot of them will just drop the meal off, especially with COVID. But every night there's a warm meal served. And then in the morning, we offer them a light breakfast. So carry out breakfast snacks types of food.
Okay. Yeah. And how many people are you finding?
Sure. So we can provide services up to 25. So far this season, we have not been full. We have not been at capacity, but I also can attribute that to the weather being a little bit more mild than we've seen in years past. So the temps all of a sudden this week start to feel like they're dropping a bunch, and I think we're going to start to see our numbers increase to the point of maybe capacity.
Well, so when it's not in the teens, it's in the 20s. Where are folks? What are they doing then?
So we find a lot of people are able to find friends to stay with from night to night. So we call that couch surfing. There are still some individuals that are still outside in elements, finding shelter underneath our bridges. And I know that there's an ordinance, but some of them are still seeking refuge in some of our parking ramps. So those are mainly the places where we would find somebody. And actually tonight I'm going on what we call a point in time count. So tonight at 11 o'clock through probably 2 in the morning, I'll be outside looking for homeless people that are unsheltered in the outside.
Yeah, I have kind of a walking path that I follow. I try to walk several miles a few times a week, and I pass some areas where I think there are some folks who have taken shelter long term, and I kind of think where some folks are hanging out. What would you say that the situation in terms of homelessness, poverty in Wausau? I mean, I suppose COVID has intensified that. I mean, is there a way to assess this?
So one of the assessment tools that we use is actually what we're doing tonight, which is the point in time count. So it gives us a small snapshot, and I'll just call it a small snapshot because it's not perfect, it's not super accurate, but it's a snapshot of what we're facing in our community in terms of the homeless people that are still living outside unsheltered in these bitterly cold temperatures. We have to keep in mind that there is a fair amount of homeless individuals who are maybe incarcerated at this time, maybe seeking treatment through North Central Healthcare. There may be some individuals that are, again, seeking shelter with friends, family, but that stuff usually ends up being short term. So, a friend will let them stay for a few nights and then it's time to go. So, that's where we start to see people. And I would say right now, since November 1st, we have seen 98 unduplicated homeless individuals just enter our shelter doors. That doesn't include the individuals that are seeking shelter at the Salvation Army, the women's community, and, so it's not a great picture, but that's why we do what we do tonight, because we'll take a look at the number of people in shelters, the number of people outside of shelter, and kind of see what it looks like for our community.
Do you see people every night?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you have families who can stay with you?
Unfortunately, we do not have space in our shelter for families. We are considered a low barrier shelter. So unlike other shelters in town, we do not take a look at criminal history upon entry. We don't drug test or alcohol test upon entry. People typically seek our shelter as their last resort because they kind of know that we are very low barrier, and we will take you if you are able to self-care and be safe. You're able to stay with us.
Yeah. And you also, the shelter, the zoning or whatever, you don't have beds, you have recliners, right?
We actually have cots right now in the church. Okay. Yep. So we got those through DHS. So they look like your general, maybe Army cot, I guess I'll call it.
Sure. Okay. What do you do? Is there a way? I mean, people, I think, I've been at the old location. I used to bring some college students up once in a while from Newman Parish at UW Stevens Point. So I have some familiarity with the program. An important part of the volunteers who come in and do meals and things when that's possible is to also just have some conversations with folks while they're eating meals and things like that. Yep. And it's just an eye-opening experience, but it's also different with every person, isn't it? I mean, there's no way to really describe who are the homeless people in Wausau, right?
No, there's really not. And, some people that come through our doors, not to stereotype, but you think of a homeless person as somebody who comes in very disheveled and dirty. And then really there's been people that present to shelter that absolutely don't present that way. And so you really can't put a face with homelessness. Homelessness is all walks of life. And many people say, geez, I'm very fortunate for what I have because I'm one paycheck away from being homeless myself. So it can happen to anybody. And I've seen circumstances where we have somebody in shelter who's got a bachelor's degree, who's gone to college and has really just fallen on hard times, which it's, whether it's been a medical emergency that has wiped them out financially or whatever the situation.
Well, and some of them have jobs, don't they?
Absolutely, they do. Yeah. Yes. And that's one of the other things that we look at too for the point in time count tonight is we are looking for abandoned vehicles in parking lots because people are, seeking shelter in their vehicles as well, because they just don't have the financial means to secure housing and stay housed on their income.
What would you say is the biggest misconception that people might have of homelessness or people who come to your facility?
Well, I'm really glad that you asked that because I think the misconception is that all homeless people are lazy. All homeless people are drunks and they're choosing this lifestyle. Everybody has a choice in life and they're choosing to be this way. What I'd really want everyone to consider is that all of these individuals who seek shelter have a very traumatic past in some way, shape, or form. So, just like, we don't become poor overnight, right? It's a series of events that leads to that. The same thing holds true for homelessness. Homelessness typically doesn't happen overnight. There's a series of events in someone's life that winds them up to be where they are in our shelter. And so you're right. The stories that people tell, the backgrounds that they share, it really just makes you feel super grateful for what you have.
And you wish you could make it better for them.
Absolutely. And so
you're doing what you can, but it's not enough, is it?
Correct. It really isn't. Most of their issues run so much deeper than 1 or 2 nights in shelter can even begin to scratch the surface to help them through. But we do connect with them immediately, and we do provide resources and opportunities for them to better themselves.
Sure.
And that's kind of one of the things, you know, shelter, my boss says this very well, shelter is the worst place to be, but it's the first place that people find themselves trying to regain their dignity and getting help and, you know, flourish out of this situation they're in.
You mentioned that you had started, Tracy, as as volunteer working the night shift or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still something that people are able to do with COVID, or what are the volunteer opportunities or needs?
Absolutely. We are always looking for volunteers. The biggest need is our overnight volunteers, as you had mentioned. We get a fair amount of volunteer help from our 6:30 to 9 shift, because that's kind of an easier shift for people to, right, convenient, a little bit easier. Once you start getting past the 9 o'clock time frame, you're thinking, you know, I'd rather be sleeping, or, you know, so it's hard to find that overnight help, but that's where our biggest need is.
Yeah.
As well in the morning, from like 6 to 8 in the morning, we also have a volunteer shift. So I would say anywhere from 12:30 a.m. until 8:30 a.m. is where our biggest need is, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially people maybe who work an odd shift, that might work, that night
Correct.
shift, or people who are retired and don't have obligations. I mean, I have done the night shift, but it screws you up so much for the day that
it does.
It doesn't really connect with working a day shift
Sure.
too well. But,
and people's commitment to the level of volunteerism is completely up to them. So, you know, if COVID is a factor for you and you're not feeling comfortable, that's okay. We do have a lot of safeguards in place, some precautions in place to keep everybody as safe as possible. So just know that. And from there, it's kind of up to the people that are interested in it as to how much commitment they want to give.
So if people are watching this and are interested, just send an email, just respond to this email and I'll connect you with Tracy. It's as simple as that. So
absolutely.
Tracy, let's talk about your new facility just a little bit. So when COVID hit, what happened?
So when COVID hit, it was kind of a big kind of slap in the forehead for everybody, I think. But in our current location at 540 South 3rd Ave, we were looking at a square footage of about 900 square feet. Okay. And that housed 25 individuals. So if you can imagine the spacing issue for social distancing was absolutely non-existent. So we found ourselves scrambling at the last minute in March to find an alternative location, which we were able to get access to the youth building at the Marathon Park. We only had that building for a month.
Well, you only needed it probably for a month at that point, huh? Because you closed April 1st or April 30th.
Right. So we were there for most of March, and then from April through the end of the season, we went over to the YWCA, and then our season ended. But with COVID still very active in our community, we definitely needed to seek out an additional space for this warming season, and those two were not options for us. So we spent a good majority of the summer taking a look at different facilities in the community to find out where we could go to make it safe. And we ended up and we've landed at First United Methodist Church on North 3rd Street next to the YMCA. And we've been able to do some slight renovations to their basement area so that we can provide safe social distancing, shower facility, a laundry facility. So that's where we're currently operating.
Okay. So, and it sounds like that's where you might hope to be long-term if possible.
We're definitely going to be there for the remainder of this season, and we have a bigger plan. I don't know if you've heard of the Community Partners Campus idea, but that is eventually where our final home will be.
Okay.
And we have really high hopes that will be completed before the end of this year.
Okay. Wonderful. Maybe for those who aren't familiar, just to summarize that a little bit.
Sure. So we kind of took a look at what the needs of the community were. And one of the things that continued to be a recurring theme was people are really struggling to access the services that they need because they're all over the place. So we as a community thought that it would be a really good idea based on feedback to try to provide some services under one roof. So we have multiple nonprofit agencies that are going to be operating out of one central location. And that is, of course, the intent and the goal of that is to help people receive the services that they need so that they don't find themselves not knowing where to go.
Right.
So it's an effort not only for the homeless community, for the underserved in our community as well.
Well, and to avoid some duplication of different things.
Absolutely.
Too, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So you're under the auspices of Catholic Charities of the Diocese of La Crosse.
Correct.
Here comes the shameless plug part of our program. What funds the Catholic Charities and the Warming Center?
So we have multiple areas of funding. However, I can tell you that 10% of our budget is strictly from the Diocesan Appeal. So we are
thanks
very
for mentioning that, Tracy.
We are very, very grateful for any and all contributions that your parish and parishioners make. We are very grateful for that support.
Yeah.
We couldn't do it without you.
Well, and I think that's when we contribute to something like the Diocesan Annual Appeal, well, that can mean, who knows, our heads spin with all of the different things that funds. But I think for me anyway, that contribution means a lot more when I know that there are 25 people who will have a place to sleep tonight because of my contribution to the Diocesan Annual Appeal. And so folks who are watching this and are thinking, I don't want to support, I don't know what that's all about. Well, this is what it's about. And it's not just here in Wausau, it's in Eau Claire, correct? There's still a warming center in Eau Claire and La Crosse.
Correct, correct. So this support that is given through the Diocesan Appeal actually supports all of our programs within the diocese. So yes, I would say that we absolutely cannot do this without you and your support. So again, I just really want to say that we are very grateful.
And conveniently, there's a link to contribute to the Diocesan Annual Appeal with this email. So how handy is that?
Excellent.
Tracy, is there anything else that you want to add or something I didn't ask about that we should be sure to address?
Sure. I just want to let all your parishioners know too that anybody who's interested in the overall mission or what we do in Catholic Charities, please feel free to visit our website, give us a call. We're happy to field any of those questions if you're wondering specifically where your money's going, things like that. We are here to answer all those questions for you.
Good. And we will have a link to the website with this email as well. So great. Well, Tracy, thank you for what you do and for this important Christian service that you provide to folks here in Wausau, just blocks away from where we are. And it goes on every night and we're oblivious to it. So thank you for giving Jesus hands and feet and eyes and ears and a heart for all of that.
Absolutely. Okay. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. We're going to conclude with a prayer from Pope Francis's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which really gets to the heart of what we're about as Christians, and certainly what you do at the Warming Center every night. So let us pray. Lord, Father of our human family, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and shared dreams. Amen.